Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving straight into the awe-inspiring, frankly mind-blowing tactical and psychological phenomenon of asymmetric defiance. We're talking about those rare, breathtaking moments in military history where a lone warrior or a vastly outnumbered group of soldiers digs their heels in and faces down an entire army. These are the historical accounts where the math just completely breaks down, where sheer human will somehow overpowers insurmountable odds.
Picture this for a second. Put yourself in a seemingly impossible scenario. You're completely surrounded by enemies on all sides. You can hear the deafening roar of an opposing force bearing down on you, and you know, without a doubt, that retreat is simply not an option. So, what is the true stuff of legend? Is it making a game-winning shot? Revolutionizing an industry? Well, no. The absolute purest form of legend is found right here, in the raw emotion and unbelievable stakes of the battlefield. It's the superhuman effort of fighting off a massive group of enemy combatants entirely by yourself. Today, we're going to unpack the anatomy of these legendary stands through the incredible stories of warriors who took on the enemy all alone.
Let's get right into Section 1. Masters of the choke point and using terrain as a force multiplier. Because look, when you're vastly outnumbered, open ground is literally your worst enemy. To really grasp why these stands even happen in the first place, we have to understand the tactical necessity of a rearguard action. This is a defensive operation carried out by a small force to delay an advancing enemy, which allows the main army, or leadership, to safely retreat. You see, these aren't just suicidal last stands for the sake of personal glory. They're desperate, tactical necessities. Someone has to hold the line so that others might live. And nothing brilliantly illustrates the sheer absurdity of these odds quite like the story of a single Norseman at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Imagine standing completely alone against the entire advancing English-Saxon army, an army that had just marched 180 miles in 4 days. The Norse army was retreating to form a shield wall, and out of all that chaos, a lone Viking stepped out onto a wooden bridge that was only about the width of 3 men. Accounts from both sides of the battle describe this massive guy just swinging his battle axe, holding off the entire Saxon force. He stood his ground, even with arrows lodged in his torso, taking down 40 Saxon soldiers one by one. I mean, nobody could cross. Finally, the only way the Saxons could defeat him was by floating a soldier underneath the bridge in a barrel who then fatally speared the Vikings straight up through the wooden slats. Now, what's fascinating is we see this exact same geographic strategy applied across the world in July of 1660 at the Battle of Pavankind. Just 300 Maratha soldiers, led by Baji Prabhu Deshpande, standing against a massive force of nearly 10,000 Adil Shahi troops, led by Sidi Masood. The Marathas used the narrow Godkind mountain pass to their absolute advantage. This was a desperate rearguard action designed to allow Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj to safely escape to the Vishalgarh fort. For 5 to 6 grueling hours, these 300 men fought ferociously, using that mountain choke point to completely neutralize the enemy's massive numbers. And their sacrifice actually worked, resulting in a strategic victory that secured their leader's escape. Moving on to Section 2, the reluctant warriors. From pacifists and non-combatants to lethal defenders. We tend to picture these heroes as, bloodthirsty gladiators born for war. But some of the most ferocious last stands were conducted by individuals who never even intended to fight, but were pushed to the absolute brink. Take Alvin York. This is a guy who actually applied to be a conscientious objector during World War I, a literal pacifist who had to be convinced that fighting was his duty. Yet in 1918, in the Argonne Forest, when his small detachment was pinned down by devastating machine gun fire, York stepped up. He later wrote in his diary, "I didn't want to kill any more than I had to, but it was they or I, and I was giving them the best I had." In that single, unbelievable action, this former pacifist eliminated over 20 German soldiers and helped capture an astonishing 132 prisoners, ultimately earning the Congressional Medal of Honor. Our next reluctant warrior is Captain Ben El Salaman. The year is 1944, and Salaman is stationed in Saipan. But here's the catch. He wasn't an infantryman. He was an army dentist. He could have safely served out the entire war without ever seeing the battlefield. However, when a frontline medic was killed, Salaman volunteered to take his place. In July, his small aid tent, filled with around 30 wounded soldiers, suddenly found itself right in the direct path of one of the largest Japanese counterattacks in the Pacific Theater. We're talking about a force of 3,000 to 5,000 soldiers ordered to advance and kill 10 Americans each. The enemy actually overran the perimeter and started bayoneting the wounded just outside Salaman's tent.
So the dentist grabs a rifle, kicks knives out of hands, shoots, and bayonets attackers trying to crawl under his tent walls. Ordering his wounded patients to retreat, Salomon stayed behind to buy them time. He rushed out, taking control of an abandoned machine gun after its crew was killed. When the area was finally retaken by American forces, they found Captain Salomon's body riddled with up to 76 bullet holes, and right in front of his machine gun position, 98 dead enemy soldiers. A dentist who gave his own life to ensure his patients survived. Unbelievable. Which brings us to Section 3, Mind over Shattered Body, the unbreakable will to survive catastrophic injuries. Seriously, try to imagine the sheer willpower required to keep fighting when your body has been fundamentally broken, when the pain alone should be entirely paralyzing. Come and fight a Gurkha. Just listen to that chilling battle cry. Those words were screamed by rifleman Lachaman Gurung in May 1945 in Burma. His forward post had just been attacked by at least 200 Japanese soldiers. 2 hand grenades landed in his trench, he hurled them right back. But a third one exploded in his right hand. It blew off his fingers, completely shattered his right arm, and severely wounded his face, torso, and right leg. His 2 comrades were incapacitated. So what exactly did Gurung do? Now completely alone, he simply loaded and fired his rifle with his left hand. He maintained this point-blank fire for 4 straight hours, screaming at the enemy to come and fight him. Of the 87 enemy dead counted later, 31 lay directly in front of this single rifleman's position. As if that isn't astounding enough, consider the staggering catalog of injuries sustained by Master Sergeant Roy Benavidez, a U.S. Army Special Forces medic in Vietnam. Just listen to this gritty, visceral reality. Shot in the leg, head and face struck by grenade shrapnel, shot in the stomach, shrapnel embedded in his back, clubbed in the jaw with a rifle butt, run completely through with a bayonet. He suffered a total of 37 distinct wounds while fighting an entire NVA battalion that outnumbered his surrounded 12-man team 100-1. Let's actually walk through the timeline of what Benavidez called his 6 hours of hell. Hour 1, he jumps from a hovering rescue helicopter armed with, wait for it, just a combat knife. By hour 2, he sprinted to the pin squad, stabilized the wounded, and armed himself with a fallen team member's AK-47. In hour 3, he's directing airstrikes while holding off the enemy, even after a rescue helicopter crashes nearby. Fast forward to hour 5, and he's defending the crash perimeter, fighting hand-to-hand, and actively killing an attacker who had literally run him through with a bayonet. And finally, in hour 6, blinded by his own blood and holding in his own intestines, he makes absolutely sure all classified materials are collected before finally allowing himself to be pulled into the final evac chopper. I mean, there are just no words. So wrapping up with Section 4, the legacy of defiance and psychological warfare from beyond the grave. Because this isn't just about the physical toll on the battlefield, it's about profound psychological warfare. These acts of asymmetrical defiance create an immense surge in morale for the allies who hear the tales, and they inflict an absolute, paralyzing terror on the enemies who have to witness them. And, this terror can be so potent that it actually outlasts the warrior's life. Take Dian Wei from the Eastern Han Dynasty, or Saito Musashibo Benkei, the legendary giant warrior monk of Japan. When Dian Wei's forces were ambushed, he stood tall with just a dozen men, fighting to the death to allow his warlord Cao Cao to escape. Legend has it his enemies were so utterly terrified of his ferocity, they wouldn't even approach his body for several minutes after he finally fell. Similarly, Benkei defended the castle of Koromobawa so his master could commit ritual suicide with honor. Benkei held off the soldiers while being rained on by arrows. Eventually, the enemy realized the giant 6'7" warrior had actually stopped moving. They crept closer, only to realize he was dead, yet his stance was so fiercely defiant he had somehow managed to remain standing on his feet. He was literally feared, even in death. As we conclude this explainer, I want to leave you with one final, provocative thought. We've talked about a lone Viking holding a bridge, a dentist protecting his patients to the very end, a soldier fighting for hours with a completely shattered arm, and a medic surviving 37 brutal wounds to save his team. When we look back at these stories, we aren't just looking at military history, we are looking at the boundless, awe-inspiring capacity of the human spirit. When faced with the absolute impossible, when the odds dictate certain defeat, what are the true limits of human endurance? Because if these stories tell us anything at all, it's that perhaps those limits don't actually exist.